In his first interview with the media, the relatively new Pope Leo recently remarked, "We're in big trouble. We are in big trouble." He was, of course, referring to the ever-widening pay gap between the rich and the poor. 60 years ago, it would seem that a chief executive officer in an organization might have made something like 4 to 6 times more than the workers that the organization received. Today, however, it can be as much as 600 times more. We therefore have an ever-increasing gap between what the working class receive and what the wealthiest elite receive. You might have noticed recently in the news that Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, will soon be the first world's trillionaire. Gone, it seems, are the days of Del Boy's dreams, when he articulated that famous line, "Well, Rodney, this time next year, we will be millionaires." I guess that sort of millionaire language is now so retro. And in the blink of an eye, we've also seemingly transversed the age of the billionaire. And so we find ourselves heading at the speed of light towards the trillionaire era. Millions, billions, trillions. Well, they're just words, aren't they? It might be helpful to give you some form of perspective of the scale that's involved in these words. So, for example, if I had 1,000,000 seconds, that converts approximately to about 12 days. 1,000,000 seconds, 12 days. Now, what if you had 1,000,000,000 seconds? What would that convert to? Anybody got an idea? 12,000. In fact, 1,000,000,000 seconds converts to not to days, but it converts to 32 years. From 12 days, 1,000,000, to 1,000,000,000, 32 years. But what if you had 1,000,000,000,000 seconds? Any idea what that would convert to? Think 100 years? 100 years. Anything? Any advance on? It's like a game show, isn't it? Higher or lower? Anybody want to go higher than 100 years? If you do, put your hand up. Higher. Good. Hey, you're getting it. Well, you might be surprised to discover that 1,000,000,000,000 seconds equates to 31,700 years. So you've got 12 days at 1,000,000, 32 days for 1,000,000,000, but 31,700 years for 1,000,000,000,000. That's the scale that we're talking about. So that hopefully gives you a better grasp of what we're talking about here. Now, let's be clear at this point. I don't want you to get the impression that I'm suggesting here that wealth and savings is wrong in itself. I'm not. And I certainly don't think the Pope is either. But the problem is, if our sole goal becomes the pursuit of wealth itself, then perhaps our society is in big trouble. Paul, in his letter to Timothy, builds a contrast between what he calls real life and destructive life. And for Paul, he sees destructive life being characterized by the pursuit of riches. As he explains in his letter, But those who want to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many senseless and harmful desires that plunge into ruin and destruction. In other words, the singular pursuit of wealth not only damages a person and their life, the one that's pursuing the wealth, but it also damages lives of people around them as they follow their pursuit. Imagine, if you will, an imaginary pharmaceutical company. They're making excellent profits by selling the drugs that they've developed that ease the living of those living with a terminal disease, let's say cancer. The drugs themselves don't cure the cancer, but it means you can live with the disease. And this pharmaceutical company is making good profit. Now, one day, let's say this imaginary pharmaceutical company develops a drug that they discover can completely kill cancer. One shot of this drug and your cancer is gone forever. What a wonderful thing that would be. Now, if the pharmaceutical company perceives that they can make more money for a longer period of time just selling the drugs that ease the living of those suffering with cancer rather than releasing the drug that would kill cancer, well, they're pursuing wealth over the real needs of real people. I'm sure we would all agree in such a circumstance, their pursuit for profit is ethically and morally wrong. They, as an entity, Paul would argue, they're damaged. And they're also damaging the lives just to make more money. Now, in Jesus' day, the common perception was that someone with wealth was significantly blessed by God. Conversely, those who were ill or poor, well, they were people in some way that was cursed. So when Jesus told this parable of the rich man and Lazarus, well, I think you can imagine that it would have come as a great surprise to his audience. Especially that after both men had died, they discovered that it was in fact the rich man who was cursed, and it was Lazarus, the poor man, who was blessed. In this parable, the very proximity of the rich and poor are brought to the foreground. Rich and poor are presented as two men. Yet despite their close proximity, it is Lazarus that seemingly goes unseen by the rich man. The parable presents us with a great moral challenge about seeing and then making visible the invisible suffering that is all around us. In our high-tech, wonderful Western society today, our great and wonderful communication network allows us to be more aware of the world's suffering than ever before. But the question is, do we truly see it? Do we really see the people suffering in the war zones around the world? Do we see the suffering of women and children in the sweatshops of the world who are invisible behind the labels that are found in the clothing that we buy? Or even the suffering of animals in the factory farms, invisible behind our desire for both cheap and fast food? Do we see? The call of Christ on our lives is to refuse to live any longer by those convenient fabrications. as the theologian Paul A. Goodyear notes, anyone reading or hearing this parable and who does not feel uncomfortable should read it carefully again. You see, we are perhaps in big trouble, Leo suggests, if we continue to turn a blind eye and not see the suffering in the world around us, especially if we choose to ignore it in favor of our own well-being and benefits. The parable of the rich man and Lazarus reminds us that we have no excuse before God for not acting when we see the suffering face that becomes for us the face of Christ himself. Amen.